Picture this. You're pulling into what should be a routine business meeting that could change your company's future forever. But instead of discussing multi-million-dollar contracts, you find yourself face-to-face with someone who thinks your car doesn't belong in their parking spot. What happens next will shock you. And the consequences? Well, let's just say some people learn the hard way that assumptions can cost you everything. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning sun casts long shadows across the pristine corporate campus of Meridian Financial Group in downtown Charlotte, North Carolina. Victoria Chen had been looking forward to this day for months. As the founder and CEO of Apex Solutions, a rapidly growing tech consulting firm, she was about to close the biggest deal in her company's history, an $80 million contract that would transform her 50-person startup into a major player in the industry. Victoria pulled her sleek black Tesla Model S into the visitor parking area, the electric vehicle gliding silently into an open spot near the main entrance. She'd chosen this particular car not just for its environmental benefits, but because it represented everything she'd worked for: innovation, success, and breaking barriers in an industry where people who look like her were still underrepresented. At 34, Victoria had built Apex Solutions from nothing. After graduating from MIT with degrees in computer science and business, she'd spent years working for tech giants, watching brilliant ideas get buried in corporate bureaucracy. 3 years ago, she'd taken the leap, using her life savings and a small business loan to start her own company. The late nights, the rejected proposals, the skeptical investors who questioned whether a young black woman could really deliver on such ambitious promises. All of that had led to this moment. The Meridian deal wasn't just about money, it was validation. Meridian Financial Group was one of the most conservative traditional financial institutions in the Southeast. If they trusted Apex Solutions to overhaul their entire digital infrastructure, it would open doors to similar contracts across the country. Victoria's team had spent 6 months crafting the perfect proposal, addressing every concern, every technical challenge, every possible objection. As she stepped out of her Tesla, Victoria smoothed down her charcoal gray business suit and grabbed her leather briefcase from the passenger seat. The morning air was crisp, and she could feel the familiar pre-meeting adrenaline coursing through her veins. She'd reviewed her presentation notes 3 times during the drive, but she knew the material by heart. This wasn't just another pitch. This was her company's future. But before she could even lock her car door, a sharp voice cut through the morning quiet. "Excuse me, what do you think you're doing?" Quote. Victoria turned to see a middle-aged white woman marching toward her, her face twisted with indignation. The woman was impeccably dressed in an expensive-looking navy blue suit, her blonde hair pulled back in a tight bun that seemed to match her rigid posture. Everything about her screamed authority and entitlement. "I'm sorry?" Victoria responded, genuinely confused. "You can't park there," the woman snapped, gesturing aggressively at the Tesla. "That's reserved parking for executives and important clients only." Victoria glanced at the parking spot. There was no sign, no marking, nothing indicating it was reserved. It was clearly marked as visitor parking, just like the dozen other identical spots in the same row. "I don't see any reserved signs," Victoria said calmly, maintaining her professional composure despite the woman's hostile tone. "This appears to be general visitor parking." The woman, who Victoria would later learn was named Patricia Whitmore, Meridian's head of client relations, let out an exasperated sigh that suggested she was dealing with someone particularly dense. "Look, honey," Patricia said, her voice dripping with condescension, "I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but that car clearly doesn't belong to you. Did someone send you to clean it? Are you here for maintenance work?" Victoria felt her jaw tighten. She'd encountered this type of assumption before, but never quite so blatantly, and certainly never right before the most important meeting of her career. "Actually, I own this car," Victoria replied evenly, "and I'm here for a business meeting." Patricia's eyes narrowed as she looked Victoria up and down, taking in the expensive suit, the confident posture, the briefcase. For a moment, uncertainty flickered across her face, but it was quickly replaced by doubled-down skepticism. "Business meeting? Here?" Patricia laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Sweetie, I think there's been some kind of mistake. Maybe you're looking for the service entrance? Or perhaps you're here to interview for a support position?" Victoria took a deep breath. She had two choices. She could escalate this confrontation and risk being late for her meeting, or she could try to de-escalate and preserve her energy for what really mattered. "Ma'am, I understand there might be some confusion, but I really do have a legitimate business meeting here in about 10 minutes. Perhaps we could—" No, Patricia interrupted, pulling out her phone. "I'm calling security. We've had issues with people impersonating business owners before. It's actually quite common. People think they can just dress up, drive a fancy car they probably don't even own, and waltz into our building." Victoria watched, in disbelief, as Patricia began dialing. The situation was escalating rapidly, and she could feel precious minutes ticking away. Her meeting with Meridian's executive team was scheduled to start at 9 a.m. sharp, and she'd specifically been told that punctuality was extremely important to the company culture. "Ma'am, please," Victoria tried again, reaching for her business card. "If you'd just let me show you my identification." "Don't you dare reach into that bag," Patricia snapped, stepping backward dramatically. "I don't know what kind of scam you're running, but I've seen enough." "Security?" "Yes, this is Patricia Whitmore from Client Relations. We have a situation in the visitor parking area. Someone is attempting to impersonate a business executive, and I believe they may have stolen a vehicle." Victoria's heart sank as she listened to Patricia's phone call. This wasn't just a misunderstanding anymore. This woman was actively trying to have her arrested. The irony wasn't lost on her that the head of client relations was treating a potential client like a criminal. But Victoria Chen hadn't built a successful company by backing down from difficult situations. As Patricia continued her dramatic phone call, describing Victoria as suspicious and clearly not who she claims to be, Victoria pulled out her own phone and did something that would change everything. She opened her contacts and scrolled to a number she'd saved but hoped she'd never have to use. The direct line to Robert Meridian Jr., the CEO of Meridian Financial Group and the son of the company's founder. Victoria had met him briefly at a networking event 6 months earlier, and he'd personally invited her to bid on this contract. The phone rang twice before his familiar voice answered. "Robert Meridian." "Mr. Meridian, this is Victoria Chen from Apex Solutions. I'm in your parking lot right now, and I'm afraid we have a rather unusual situation." Robert Meridian's voice carried the weight of someone accustomed to solving problems quickly and decisively. "Victoria, what kind of situation are we talking about?" Quote. Victoria glanced at Patricia, who was still on her own phone with security, gesturing wildly and speaking in increasingly dramatic tones about the, quote, dangerous imposter in the parking lot. "Well, your head of client relations seems to believe I've stolen my car and that I'm impersonating a business owner. She's currently calling security to have me arrested," Victoria explained, keeping her voice steady despite the absurdity of the situation. There was a pause on the other end of the line. "I'm sorry, did you say Patricia Whitmore?" "I didn't catch her last name, but yes, she introduced herself as being from Client Relations." Victoria could hear Robert's sharp intake of breath. "Victoria, I am so incredibly sorry. Stay exactly where you are. I'm coming down personally right now." The line went dead, and Victoria tucked her phone back into her briefcase. Across the parking lot, Patricia had finished her call and was now standing with her arms crossed, a satisfied smirk on her face as she watched Victoria. "Security will be here any minute," Patricia announced loudly, as if she were addressing a crowd rather than one person. "I hope whatever little game you thought you were playing was worth it, because you're about to learn that Meridian Financial Group doesn't tolerate this kind of behavior." Victoria decided that silence was her best strategy at this point. She leaned against her Tesla, checked her watch, 8:47 a.m., and waited. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on her. In 13 minutes, she was supposed to be in a conference room presenting a proposal that would revolutionize Meridian's digital infrastructure. Instead, she was standing in a parking lot being accused of grand theft auto by the very company she was trying to help. 3 minutes later, a security guard emerged from the building. He was a young man, probably in his 20s, wearing a crisp uniform and looking decidedly uncomfortable about whatever he'd been told over the radio. "Ma'am," he addressed Victoria hesitantly, "I'm going to need to ask you some questions." But before Victoria could respond, the building's main entrance burst open, and Robert Meridian Jr. came striding out, his face a mask of barely controlled fury. At 52, Robert cut an imposing figure, tall, silver-haired, and carrying himself with the confidence of someone who'd built a financial empire. But right now, he looked like a man who'd just discovered a massive problem in his organization. "What the hell is going on here?" Robert's voice boomed across the parking lot, causing several people near the building entrance to stop and stare. Patricia's smug expression faltered for just a moment before she recovered, apparently assuming that Robert's anger was directed at Victoria. "Mr. Meridian, thank goodness you're here." Patricia rushed over to him. "I caught this woman trying to impersonate a business executive. She claims she owns that Tesla, but obviously that's ridiculous. I've called security to handle the situation before she could gain access to our building." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Robert's gaze shifted from Patricia to Victoria, and Victoria could see the exact moment when the full weight of what had happened hit him. His jaw clenched, and when he spoke again, his voice was dangerously quiet. "Patricia, I'd like you to meet Victoria Chen, founder and CEO of Apex Solutions. She's here for a 9 a.m. meeting with our executive board to discuss an $80 million contract." The color drained from Patricia's face so quickly that Victoria almost felt sorry for her. Almost. What? But she... Patricia stammered, looking back and forth between Robert and Victoria as if she were watching a tennis match. "She what, Patricia?" Robert's voice had gotten even quieter, which somehow made it more intimidating. "She's black? She's young? She drives a nice car? Please, enlighten me about what exactly made you think she couldn't possibly be a successful business owner." The security guard, sensing the shift in dynamics, began backing away slowly, clearly wanting no part of whatever was about to unfold. "Mr. Meridian, I was just being cautious," Patricia said, her voice becoming smaller with each word. "We've had issues with people trying to gain unauthorized access to the building, and I thought..." "You thought what, exactly?" Robert stepped closer to Patricia, his presence making her shrink back visibly. "That someone would steal a Tesla, put on an expensive business suit, and come here at 9 a.m. on a Tuesday morning just to... What? Look around our lobby?" Victoria watched the exchange with a mix of vindication and professional curiosity. This was clearly a man who didn't tolerate incompetence or prejudice in his organization, which explained why Meridian had maintained its reputation for decades, despite the conservative industry they operated in. Patricia opened her mouth to respond, but Robert held up a hand to stop her. "Actually, don't answer that. We'll discuss your future with this company later." He turned to Victoria, his entire demeanor shifting from barely contained rage to professional embarrassment. "Victoria, I cannot begin to apologize for this inexcusable behavior. This is not how Meridian Financial Group treats our clients, our partners, or frankly, any human being." Victoria had been preparing for this moment since Patricia first approached her. She had considered various responses: anger, demands for apologies, threats to walk away from the deal. But looking at Robert's genuine mortification and Patricia's obvious horror at realizing her mistake, Victoria made a calculated decision. "I appreciate your apology, Robert," she said calmly. "These situations are unfortunate, but they do provide valuable insight into company culture and decision-making processes." Robert caught the subtle warning in her words immediately. Victoria wasn't just talking about Patricia's behavior. She was evaluating whether this incident reflected broader issues within Meridian's organization. An $80 million contract could easily disappear if the client felt they couldn't trust the company's judgment or values. "You're absolutely right," Robert said carefully, "and I want you to know that this incident will be thoroughly investigated and appropriate action will be taken. Patricia, please return to your office immediately. We'll speak after my meeting with Ms. Chen." Patricia opened her mouth as if to protest, then seemed to think better of it. She shot one last confused look at Victoria, as if she still couldn't quite process that this woman she'd tried to have arrested was actually the CEO she'd heard so much about, then hurried back toward the building. Robert turned back to Victoria, running a hand through his silver hair. "Victoria, I know this has been an incredibly inappropriate start to what should have been a straightforward business meeting. If you're willing to continue, I'd like to personally escort you upstairs and ensure that the rest of your visit reflects the professional standards this company actually maintains." Victoria checked her watch again. 8:54 a.m. She still had 6 minutes before the meeting was supposed to start, which was actually perfect timing. But as she looked at Robert's earnest expression and considered her response, Victoria realized that this incident had fundamentally changed the power dynamic of their entire relationship. An hour ago, she'd been the one trying to prove her company's worth to Meridian. Now Meridian was the one that needed to prove they deserved to work with her. "I'm willing to continue," Victoria said finally, "but I think we need to have a conversation about how situations like this reflect on corporate partnerships and risk management." Robert nodded grimly. "Absolutely. And Victoria? I want you to know that what happened here today is not representative of our values or our standards. Patricia's behavior was completely unacceptable, and there will be consequences." Quote, as they walked toward the building entrance, Victoria couldn't help but notice the stares from other employees who had witnessed the parking lot confrontation. Word was clearly already spreading through the building about the incident, and she could practically see the gossip machine spinning into action. But what nobody in that building knew yet, including Robert, was that Victoria had recorded Patricia's entire tirade on her phone, and she was about to use that recording in ways that would change everything. The elevator ride to the 32nd floor was filled with the kind of uncomfortable silence that follows a corporate disaster. Robert stood rigidly beside Victoria, his jaw still clenched as he processed the implications of what had just occurred. Victoria, meanwhile, was recalculating her entire approach to the upcoming presentation. When the elevator doors opened, they were greeted by Margaret Foster, Robert's executive assistant, who had clearly been briefed on the situation. Her professional smile was strained, and Victoria could see the woman struggling to maintain composure while internally panicking about the morning's events. "Miss Chen, welcome to Meridian Financial Group," Margaret said, her voice carefully modulated. "The conference room is ready, and the executive team is assembled. Can I offer you coffee, water, or anything else before we begin?" "Coffee would be perfect, thank you," Victoria replied, noting how Margaret's eyes kept darting between her and Robert, as if trying to gauge the damage from the parking lot incident. As they walked down the hallway toward the conference room, Victoria observed the pristine corporate environment around her. Everything was designed to project stability, tradition, and success. Polished marble floors, oil paintings of the company's founders, mahogany paneling that probably cost more than most people's annual salaries. It was exactly the kind of old money atmosphere where someone like Patricia would feel comfortable making assumptions about who belonged and who didn't. Robert paused outside the conference room door, turning to face Victoria directly. "Before we go in, I want you to know that I haven't told the team about what happened downstairs. How you want to handle this, whether you want to address it or proceed with the meeting as planned, is entirely your decision." Victoria appreciated the gesture, but she'd already made her choice. Let's proceed with the presentation. Business first. The conference room was impressive. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking downtown Charlotte, a massive table that could seat 20 people, and state-of-the-art presentation equipment. Seated around the table were 5 members of Meridian's executive team, all impeccably dressed, all clearly curious about the woman who had Robert looking unusually tense. "Everyone, I'd like you to meet Victoria Chen, founder and CEO of Apex Solutions," Robert announced as they entered. "Victoria, let me introduce our team." Victoria shook hands with each executive, noting their expressions as Robert made introductions. There was David Harrison, the Chief Technology Officer, who seemed genuinely interested in what she had to say. Sarah Mitchell, the Chief Financial Officer, appeared skeptical but professional. Thomas Reed, Head of Operations, looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Janet Webb, Chief Risk Officer, studied Victoria with the calculating gaze of someone trying to assess potential problems. And finally, Michael Torres, Chief Marketing Officer, who seemed the most relaxed of the group. "Miss Chen, we've all reviewed your proposal extensively," Sarah began once everyone was seated. "Your company's track record is impressive, especially considering how young Apex Solutions is. But an $80 million digital transformation project is significant even for established firms. What makes you confident that your team can deliver on this scale?" Victoria had expected this question. It was the obvious starting point for any potential client concerned about risk management. She moved to the front of the room, connecting her laptop to the presentation system with practiced efficiency. "That's exactly the right question to ask," Victoria said, clicking to her first slide. "But before I address your concerns about scale, I want to show you something that I think will fundamentally change how you think about this project." The screen displayed a detailed analysis of Meridian's current digital infrastructure, but this wasn't just the surface-level assessment that most consulting firms would provide. Victoria's team had identified 17 critical vulnerabilities that could cost the company millions in potential breaches, 3 outdated systems that were already costing them thousands in efficiency losses every month, and 6 integration gaps that were preventing them from leveraging data they were already collecting. David Harrison leaned forward, his skepticism visibly evaporating. How did you identify the API conflicts in our legacy accounting system? We've been trying to isolate that issue for months. My team didn't just review your current setup, Victoria explained, advancing to the next slide. We reverse-engineered your entire digital ecosystem and ran predictive models on your data flow patterns. What you're seeing isn't just an audit. It's a forensic analysis of exactly where your current infrastructure is failing you. For the next 45 minutes, Victoria walked the executive team through a presentation that was part technical masterpiece, part business strategy, and part vision for the future. She showed them not just what Apex Solutions could do, but what Meridian could become with the right technological foundation. Janet Webb, the Chief Risk Officer, interrupted about halfway through the presentation. This is all very impressive, but implementing changes of this magnitude involves significant risk. What happens if something goes wrong during the transition? What are our backup protocols? Victoria had been waiting for this question too. She clicked on a slide that showed a detailed risk mitigation strategy, complete with rollback procedures, parallel system testing, and phased implementation timelines. We never implement direct changes to live systems, Victoria explained. Every modification goes through a parallel testing environment that perfectly mirrors your production setup. If any issues arise, we have immediate rollback capabilities with zero data loss and minimal downtime. In fact, our average transition period actually improves system performance by 12% over baseline. Thomas Reed, who had seemed disinterested earlier, suddenly perked up. 12% improvement during transition? How is that possible? Because we're not just replacing systems, we're optimizing workflows in real time, Victoria said, her confidence building as she saw the team becoming genuinely engaged. Your current setup has redundancies and inefficiencies that have accumulated over years. As we migrate each component, we're also streamlining processes that have been slowing you down. The presentation continued for another 30 minutes, with Victoria fielding increasingly technical questions from the team. It was clear that they were impressed, but she could also sense the underlying concern that had brought her here in the first place, the question of whether a relatively small company could handle such a massive undertaking. Finally, Robert spoke up. Victoria, this has been exceptional. Your technical knowledge is clearly world-class, and your understanding of our business needs is remarkably thorough. But I have to ask the elephant in the room question. Why should we trust a 50-person company with our entire digital future? Victoria had saved her best argument for last. She clicked to her final slide, which showed a comparison chart that made several executives inhale sharply. Because you're not just hiring Apex Solutions, she said. You're hiring the team that built the core architecture for 3 of the systems you're currently using. David, that API integration platform that handles your customer data? 2 of my senior developers wrote the original code when they worked for System Tech 5 years ago. Sarah, the financial modeling software you use for risk assessment? My CTO designed the algorithm that powers it. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Victoria continued. The choice isn't between a big company and a small company. It's between hiring the people who built the tools you already rely on, or hiring a massive firm that will assign junior developers to reverse engineer systems my team created in the first place. Michael Torres was the first to break the silence. So essentially, you're offering us direct access to the architects of our current infrastructure, plus the ability to design something completely customized for our needs. Exactly, Victoria confirmed. And we can do it faster, more efficiently, and with better long-term support than any of the larger firms you're considering. Margaret Foster knocked softly on the conference room door and entered with a coffee service, providing a natural break in the intense discussion. As the executives murmured among themselves and reached for their cups, Victoria could sense the shift in the room's energy. What had started as a skeptical evaluation had transformed into genuine excitement about the possibilities. But just as the meeting seemed to be reaching its natural conclusion, Victoria's phone buzzed with a text message. She glanced at it discreetly and saw a message from her assistant back at Apex Solutions. Check LinkedIn. Patricia Whitmore is posting about this morning's incident. You need to see this. Victoria's blood ran cold as she realized that the parking lot confrontation was about to become much more complicated than anyone had anticipated. Victoria excused herself from the conference room, claiming she needed to make a quick call to her office about implementation timelines. But as soon as she stepped into the hallway, she opened LinkedIn on her phone, and what she saw made her stomach drop. Patricia Whitmore had posted a lengthy status update just 20 minutes earlier, and it was already generating significant engagement from her professional network. "Had to deal with an incredibly disturbing situation at work today," Patricia's post began. "Someone attempted to gain unauthorized access to our building by impersonating a business executive. When I questioned their presence in our executive parking area, they became aggressive and tried to intimidate me. Thankfully, our security protocols worked exactly as designed. It's unfortunate that we live in a world where people think they can deceive their way into corporate environments, but I'm proud to work for a company that takes security seriously. #corporate security, #stay vigilant, #Meridian Financial." The post had already received dozens of likes and supportive comments from Patricia's network, with people praising her for staying alert and protecting company assets. But what made Victoria's blood run cold wasn't just the blatant misrepresentation of events. It was the fact that Patricia had tagged Meridian Financial Group and was publicly claiming that security protocols had worked as designed. Victoria screenshot the post and quickly forwarded it to her assistant with a message, "Send this to our legal team immediately." Also, pull Patricia Whitmore's complete LinkedIn profile and any other social media presence. I need a full background report within the hour. She was about to head back into the conference room when her phone rang. The caller ID showed her marketing director, James Rodriguez. "Victoria, we have a problem," James said without preamble. "Patricia Whitmore's LinkedIn post is starting to get traction. Someone shared it to a business networking group with 50,000 members, and people are commenting without knowing the full story. This could become a reputation issue fast." "How bad is it?" Victoria asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. "Well, the good news is that most of the comments are generic support for corporate security measures. The bad news is that 3 people have specifically asked which company tried to, quote, infiltrate Meridian, and if Patricia responds with Apex Solutions' name, this could spiral quickly." Victoria closed her eyes and took a deep breath. In the span of 2 hours, what should have been the most important business meeting of her career had turned into a potential public relations nightmare. And the worst part was that she was still in the middle of negotiations with the very company whose employee was currently defaming her on social media. "James, I need you to prepare 2 different response strategies," Victoria said. "One assumes we move forward with the Meridian deal despite this incident. The other assumes we walk away and need to control the narrative independently. I'll know which direction we're going within the next hour." "Got it. But Victoria, you should also know that our legal team wants to discuss defamation options. Patricia's post could be interpreted as claiming you committed a crime." Victoria felt a surge of anger, but she forced herself to stay focused. She had a choice to make, and it would define not just this deal, but potentially her company's entire future. She could walk away from Meridian, publicly expose Patricia's behavior, and turn this into a cautionary tale about corporate racism. Or she could find a way to use this situation to her advantage. When Victoria returned to the conference room, she could immediately sense that something had changed. The executives were huddled in quiet conversation, and Robert's expression was grim. Margaret Foster was standing near the door with a tablet in her hands, looking like she'd rather be anywhere else. "Victoria," Robert said as she entered, "we need to discuss something that's just come to our attention." Victoria's heart sank. They'd obviously seen Patricia's post. "It appears that Patricia has shared her version of this morning's events on social media," Robert continued, his voice carefully controlled. "Margaret showed me the post, and I have to say it's completely unacceptable. Not only is it a misrepresentation of what actually happened, but it's also a violation of company policy regarding external communications about internal incidents." David Harrison, the CTO, looked confused. "Robert, what incident are you referring to? What happened this morning?" Quote. Victoria realized that Robert had kept his word about not telling the executive team about the parking lot confrontation. But now, with Patricia's public post, the situation was about to become much more complicated. Robert looked at Victoria, clearly asking for permission to explain. Victoria nodded, recognizing that transparency was now their only option. "This morning, before our meeting, Patricia Whitmore confronted Victoria in our parking lot, Robert began. She accused Victoria of stealing her car and impersonating a business executive. Patricia called security and attempted to have Victoria arrested for fraud. The conference room erupted in shocked murmurs. Sarah Mitchell, the CFO, looked appalled. She did what? According to Patricia's LinkedIn post, which was published about 30 minutes ago, she's characterizing this as a successful security intervention, Robert continued. She's claiming that someone tried to infiltrate our building and that our protocols worked properly. Janet Webb, the chief risk officer, immediately grasped the implications. Robert, this creates significant liability issues for the company. If Patricia is publicly claiming that our security protocols worked as designed in a situation where they clearly didn't, we could be facing both discrimination claims and defamation issues. Thomas Reed, who had seemed disinterested earlier, was now fully engaged. Wait, so Patricia assumed that Victoria couldn't possibly be a legitimate business owner based on what exactly? The uncomfortable silence that followed made the answer obvious to everyone in the room. Michael Torres, the marketing director, looked like he was going to be sick. This is a PR disaster waiting to happen. If this story gets picked up by business media, it could destroy our reputation for diversity and inclusion. We've spent years building relationships with minority-owned businesses. Victoria had been listening to the conversation unfold, but now she decided it was time to take control of the narrative. I appreciate everyone's concern, she said, standing up and moving back to the front of the room, but I think we're getting ahead of ourselves. Yes, this morning's incident was inappropriate and unfortunate. But more importantly, we have a business decision to make. She clicked back to her presentation, displaying the final slide that showed the projected benefits of the digital transformation project. The question isn't whether Patricia Whitmore behaved unprofessionally. We all agree that she did. The question is whether Meridian Financial Group is the kind of company that can learn from mistakes and move forward, or whether this incident represents a fundamental incompatibility between our organizations. Robert leaned forward. What do you mean? I mean that how you handle the situation tells me everything I need to know about whether Apex Solutions should enter into a long-term partnership with Meridian, Victoria explained. Patricia's behavior this morning was problematic. Her decision to misrepresent the incident on social media is worse, but your response to both issues will determine whether we can work together. Sarah Mitchell understood immediately. You're saying that this incident has shifted the power dynamic of our negotiation. Exactly, Victoria confirmed. 2 hours ago, I was here trying to convince you that Apex Solutions deserved this contract. Now, you need to convince me that Meridian Financial Group deserves to work with us. The room fell silent as the executives processed this reversal. They'd gone from evaluating Victoria's company to being evaluated by her, and everyone understood that the stakes had suddenly gotten much higher. David Harrison was the first to speak. What would it take for you to feel confident moving forward with this partnership? Victoria had been preparing for this question since she'd seen Patricia's LinkedIn post. Her answer would either salvage the deal or end it permanently. 3 things, she said. First, Patricia Whitmore needs to be held accountable for her actions, both this morning's confrontation and her decision to publicly misrepresent the incident. Second, Meridian needs to implement concrete measures to ensure that similar situations don't happen again. And third, this company needs to demonstrate that it's serious about creating an inclusive environment for all its partners and clients. Robert nodded slowly. Those seem like reasonable requirements. What specifically did you have in mind? Victoria walked to the whiteboard at the front of the conference room and picked up a marker. The executives watched in fascination as she began outlining her demands with the same methodical precision she'd used during her technical presentation. Requirement 1, Victoria said, writing on the board, Patricia Whitmore's immediate termination and a public correction of her LinkedIn post. Not a private apology, not a quiet reassignment, termination, and the correction needs to acknowledge that her characterization of events was completely false. She turned back to face the room. Patricia didn't just make a mistake this morning, she doubled down on that mistake by publicly lying about what happened. That demonstrates a pattern of poor judgment that makes her unsuitable for a client-facing role. Robert shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Victoria, I understand your position, but Patricia has been with the company for 12 years. Our HR policies require a formal investigation process before termination. Then start the investigation immediately, Victoria replied without hesitation. And while you're conducting it, Patricia should be suspended from all client interactions, because every day she remains in her current role represents a liability risk for your company. Sarah Mitchell, the CFO, was frantically taking notes. What kind of liability risk are we talking about? Victoria clicked to a new slide on her presentation screen, one she'd prepared during her brief hallway break. It showed a legal analysis that her team had compiled in real time. Defamation, for starters, Victoria explained. Patricia's LinkedIn post falsely implies that I committed attempted fraud. That's actionable. Then there's the discrimination angle. Her assumption that I couldn't legitimately own an expensive car or be a successful business owner was clearly based on racial bias. And finally, there's the corporate negligence issue. If Patricia treats other minority clients this way, Meridian could be facing a pattern of discriminatory behavior. Janet Webb, the chief risk officer, looked like she was calculating potential legal costs in her head. How many people saw the LinkedIn post? As of 10 minutes ago, it had been shared 43 times and had received over 200 interactions, Victoria said. And those numbers are growing exponentially. Social media moves fast, and this story has all the elements that make content go viral. Corporate racism, luxury cars, and a David versus Goliath dynamic. Thomas Reed leaned forward. What's your second requirement? Victoria turned back to the whiteboard. Requirement 2. Meridian implements mandatory bias training for all client-facing employees, with quarterly refreshers and accountability measures, but not generic diversity training. I'm talking about specific protocols for how employees should interact with clients and potential partners regardless of their appearance, age, race, or perceived status. She wrote additional details under the second requirement. This training should include case studies, role-playing scenarios, and clear consequences for violations. And it should be developed in consultation with diversity and inclusion experts, not just your internal HR team. Michael Torres, the marketing director, nodded approvingly. That actually aligns with initiatives we've been discussing for months. The business case for inclusive practices is overwhelming. Companies with diverse leadership teams consistently outperform their competitors. Which brings me to requirement 3, Victoria continued, moving to a new section of the whiteboard. Meridian establishes a formal minority supplier development program with concrete goals and transparent reporting. You should be actively seeking partnerships with minority-owned businesses, not just tolerating them when they happen to walk through your door. David Harrison looked intrigued. What would that program look like? Victoria had clearly given this considerable thought. Annual targets for contracts with minority-owned businesses, mentorship programs for emerging companies, participation in minority business trade shows and networking events, and public reporting on your progress. Essentially, you make diversity and inclusion a measurable business objective, not just a nice-to-have. Robert was quiet for a long moment, clearly weighing the implications of Victoria's demands. Finally, he spoke. These are significant commitments, Victoria. Implementing them would require board approval and substantial resources. They're also smart business practices that will benefit Meridian in the long run, Victoria countered. The question is whether you're willing to make that investment to secure this partnership and prevent future incidents. Margaret Foster knocked on the door again, but this time her expression was urgent. Mr. Meridian, I'm sorry to interrupt, but we have a situation. Patricia Whitmore is in the lobby, demanding to speak with you about false accusations being made against her. She says she knows her rights and won't be silenced. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Victoria felt a surge of adrenaline. Patricia was clearly not going to fade quietly into the background. She's in the lobby right now? Robert asked. Yes, sir. Security is with her, but she's being quite vocal about the situation. She's also mentioned that she's contacted several business journalists about what she calls attempted corporate infiltration. Victoria's phone immediately started buzzing with notifications. She glanced at it and saw messages from her assistant, her legal team, and her marketing director. The situation was escalating rapidly. Robert, Victoria said calmly, I think it's time you saw something. She pulled out her phone and opened the voice recording app she'd activated during Patricia's original tirade in the parking lot. Before Patricia's demands get any more dramatic, you should hear exactly what happened this morning. Victoria connected her phone to the conference room's audio system and played the recording. Patricia's voice filled the room, dripping with condescension and contempt as she accused Victoria of stealing the Tesla, questioned her legitimacy, and called security to report an impersonator. The executives listened in stunned silence as Patricia's voice described Victoria as, quote, suspicious, and claimed she was clearly not who she claims to be. When the recording reached the part where Patricia dramatically told security that someone was, quote, attempting to impersonate a business executive, Sarah Mitchell actually winced. When the recording ended, the conference room was dead quiet. Finally, David Harrison spoke up. "Holy shit." "David," Robert said automatically, then caught himself. "Actually, no, that's exactly the right response." Janet Webb was already pulling out her own phone. "I need to call our legal department immediately. Patricia's behavior is so far beyond acceptable that we're looking at potential lawsuits from multiple angles." "And that recording changes everything," Sarah added. "Victoria, do you have Patricia's permission to use that recording?" Victoria smiled for the first time since entering the building. North Carolina is a one-party consent state for audio recordings. As long as one person in the conversation knows it's being recorded, which I did, it's completely legal. Thomas Reed looked like he was processing the implications. "So essentially, we have documented proof that Patricia racially profiled a client, lied about the incident on social media, and is now downstairs trying to intimidate management into supporting her version of events." "That's a fairly accurate summary," Victoria confirmed. Robert stood up abruptly. "Margaret, please tell security to escort Patricia to HR immediately. She's not to speak to any media representatives, and she's not to post anything else on social media. If she refuses to cooperate, call our legal department." He turned back to Victoria. "I want to be crystal clear about something. Your 3 requirements aren't just reasonable, they're necessary. We obviously have serious cultural issues that need to be addressed immediately." Victoria could sense the shift in the room's energy. What had started as a negotiation was now becoming a crisis management strategy session. "I appreciate that, Robert, but I need more than verbal commitments. If Meridian wants to move forward with this partnership, I need concrete timelines and accountability measures for each of my requirements." Sarah Mitchell was already opening her laptop. "What kind of timelines are we talking about?" Victoria returned to the whiteboard and began writing specific deadlines. Patricia's termination and public correction within 48 hours. Bias training program development. 30 days to create the curriculum. 60 days to implement company-wide. Minority supplier development program. 90 days to establish goals and procedures, with the first quarterly report due within 6 months. "And if we agree to these timelines," Robert asked carefully, "you're prepared to move forward with the $80 million contract." Victoria capped the marker and set it down. "If you meet these requirements within the specified timeframes, Apex Solutions will not only fulfill the original contract terms, we'll add a 10% discount for the inconvenience and provide an additional year of free technical support." The offer was so generous that it took the executives a moment to process it. Victoria was essentially rewarding Meridian for doing the right thing, while making it clear that the cost of not meeting her requirements would be far greater than the benefit of compliance. But before anyone could respond, Margaret Foster burst through the door again, this time looking genuinely panicked. "Mr. Meridian, we have a major problem. Patricia just gave an interview to Channel 9 News in the lobby. It's going to air on the noon broadcast." The conference room erupted into chaos. Robert immediately grabbed his phone and started dialing the company's crisis communications team, while Sarah Mitchell began frantically typing on her laptop, likely calculating the potential financial impact of negative media coverage. David Harrison muttered something about updating his resume, and Janet Webb looked like she was having a panic attack. But Victoria remained perfectly calm. In fact, she was smiling. "Margaret," Victoria said, "do you know what Patricia told the news crew?" Margaret looked confused by Victoria's serene reaction. She claimed that Meridian Financial Group had been infiltrated by someone attempting corporate espionage. She said that when she tried to stop the infiltration, the company turned against her to protect the criminal. Thomas Reed dropped his head into his hands. "She's completely lost it." "Actually," Victoria said, pulling out her phone again, "this might be the best thing that could have happened." Everyone stared at her like she'd lost her mind. Victoria connected her phone to the conference room's display screen and opened her email. "While Patricia was downstairs giving her interview, my legal team was busy. They've prepared a comprehensive response package that includes the parking lot recording, screenshots of Patricia's LinkedIn post with timestamps, and a detailed timeline of events. They've also compiled Patricia's social media history, which reveals a pattern of questionable posts about, quote, urban crime and welfare fraud. Victoria clicked through several screenshots that made the executives visibly uncomfortable. Patricia's Facebook page contained multiple shares of articles about welfare fraud, posts questioning whether certain neighborhoods were safe for business, and comments on local news stories that revealed deep-seated biases. My team also discovered that Patricia has made similar accusations against at least 3 other minority visitors to this building over the past 2 years, Victoria continued. Apparently, she called security on a black attorney last year, claiming he didn't look like he belonged here. She also questioned a Latina entrepreneur about whether she was really the owner of a catering company that was providing lunch for a board meeting. Robert looked sick. How did your team find this information so quickly? Quote, professional networks are smaller than people think, Victoria explained. When you start asking the right questions, patterns emerge quickly. Patricia's behavior this morning wasn't an isolated incident. It was part of a documented pattern of racial profiling. Margaret's phone rang, and she answered it quickly. After a brief conversation, she hung up and turned to Robert with a grim expression. That was our PR department. Channel 9 has moved the story to breaking news. They're planning to lead with it on the noon broadcast, and they're promoting it as corporate racism exposed at major financial firm. How much time do we have before it airs? Robert asked. Margaret checked her watch. 23 minutes. Victoria stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the Charlotte skyline. Robert, you have a choice to make, and you have to make it right now. You can either get ahead of this story by taking decisive action, or you can let Patricia's narrative define your company's reputation. What do you mean? Victoria turned back to face the room. Call Channel 9 immediately. Tell them you want to provide a response to Patricia's allegations before the story airs. Then authorize me to share the parking lot recording and the additional evidence my team has compiled. Sarah Mitchell looked alarmed. Victoria, that would essentially be declaring war on a former employee. The legal implications could be enormous. The legal implications of letting Patricia's false narrative go unchallenged are far worse, Victoria countered. She's already committed defamation by publicly claiming I attempted corporate espionage. Now she's doubled down by telling a news crew that Meridian is protecting criminals. Your choice is between controlling the narrative with facts or letting Patricia destroy your reputation with lies. David Harrison was nodding slowly. Victoria's right. If we don't respond immediately, Patricia's version becomes the default story. By the time we provide a correction, the damage will already be done. Robert was clearly wrestling with the decision. What exactly are you proposing? Victoria pulled up a document on her phone and connected it to the display screen. My communications team has prepared a complete response strategy. Here's what I'm proposing. Meridian issues an immediate statement acknowledging that a client was inappropriately challenged by an employee, that the employee has been terminated, and that the company is implementing comprehensive reforms to prevent similar incidents. You emphasize that Meridian takes discrimination seriously and that Patricia's actions don't reflect company values. She scrolled to the next section. Then, you provide Channel 9 with the parking lot recording, which proves that Patricia's claims about infiltration and espionage are completely false. You also share the evidence of her pattern of discriminatory behavior, which demonstrates that this wasn't a one-time mistake, but a systematic problem that you're now addressing. And what about the business partnership? Thomas Reed asked. Victoria smiled. That's the best part. You announced that despite this incident, Apex Solutions has agreed to move forward with the $80 million contract, contingent on Meridian's implementation of the diversity and inclusion reforms we discussed. It becomes a story about corporate accountability and positive change, rather than just corporate racism. Janet Webb was frantically scribbling notes. From a risk management perspective, this approach actually minimizes our exposure. If we're proactive about addressing the problem and implementing solutions, it's much harder for other potential victims to claim we knew about Patricia's behavior and ignored it. Margaret's phone rang again. She answered quickly, then looked up with alarm. That was security. Patricia is back in the lobby with what appears to be her own camera crew. She's demanding to confront the, quote, criminal, who she claims is still in the building. The room fell silent. Everyone understood that the situation had just escalated beyond anything they could have anticipated. Victoria calmly picked up her briefcase and headed toward the door. "Well then, I suppose it's time for Patricia and me to have that confrontation." "Victoria, wait," Robert called after her. "You don't have to do this. We can have security escort her out." Victoria paused at the door and turned back. "Robert, Patricia has spent the last 3 hours publicly calling me a criminal and claiming I'm a fraud. She's convinced herself that she's the victim in this situation. The only way this ends is if she's forced to confront the reality of what she's done." She opened her briefcase and pulled out a folder. "Besides, I have one more piece of evidence that Patricia doesn't know about yet. Something that's going to make her realize exactly how much trouble she's in." Victoria headed for the elevator, leaving the executive staring after her in amazement and terror. As the elevator doors closed, she could hear Robert frantically calling the company's legal department, preparing for what was about to become the most dramatic corporate confrontation in Meridian Financial Group's 70-year history. When the elevator reached the lobby, Victoria could hear Patricia's voice before the doors even opened. She was speaking loudly to what appeared to be a reporter and cameraman, gesticulating wildly as she described her version of the morning's events. "The infiltrator is still in this building," Patricia was saying. "Meridian Financial Group is protecting someone who attempted to commit corporate espionage, and I'm being persecuted for doing my job." Victoria stepped out of the elevator, and the moment Patricia saw her, everything changed. The moment Patricia spotted Victoria emerging from the elevator, her face transformed from righteous indignation to pure shock, then quickly to rage. The reporter, a sharp-eyed woman in her 30s, immediately sensed the dramatic shift in energy and signaled her cameraman to start rolling. "That's her!" Patricia shrieked, pointing dramatically at Victoria. "That's the woman who tried to infiltrate our building. She's the criminal I've been telling you about." Victoria walked calmly across the marble lobby, her heels clicking with measured precision. The security guards positioned themselves nervously between the two women, unsure how to handle a situation that was rapidly spiraling beyond their training. "Ms. Whitmore," Victoria said, her voice carrying clearly across the lobby, "I think there's been a significant misunderstanding." The reporter stepped forward, microphone extended. "I'm Jennifer Walsh from Channel 9 News. Are you the person Ms. Whitmore has been describing?" "I'm Victoria Chen, founder and CEO of Apex Solutions," Victoria replied, extending her hand to the reporter. "I'm here for a business meeting to discuss an $80 million contract with Meridian Financial Group." Patricia's face went white, then red, then white again as the implications hit her. That's impossible. You can't be. You don't look like." "Like what, Patricia?" Victoria asked, her voice still perfectly calm. "What exactly don't I look like?" The reporter's eyes lit up with the recognition that she was witnessing something extraordinary. "Ms. Whitmore, are you saying that you assumed Ms. Chen couldn't be a legitimate business owner based on her appearance?" Patricia stammered, realizing she was being recorded and that whatever she said next would be broadcast across Charlotte. No, that's not. I was protecting company property. She was acting suspicious." Victoria opened her briefcase and pulled out the folder she'd shown the executives. "Ms. Walsh, I think your viewers deserve to know the truth about what happened here today." She handed the reporter a printed timeline of events, complete with timestamps and documentation. "This morning at 8:47 a.m., I arrived for a scheduled business meeting. Ms. Whitmore approached me in the parking lot and accused me of stealing my own car. She called security and attempted to have me arrested for impersonating a business executive." Patricia's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. You were acting suspicious. You didn't belong there." "What made you think I didn't belong there, Patricia?" Victoria asked, pulling out her phone. "Was it my business suit? My briefcase? Or was it something else entirely?" Jennifer Walsh was frantically taking notes while her cameraman captured every moment. "Ms. Chen, do you have any evidence to support your version of events?" Victoria smiled and connected her phone to a portable speaker she'd pulled from her briefcase. "As a matter of fact, I do." The parking lot recording filled the lobby, Patricia's voice echoing off the marble walls as she accused Victoria of theft, questioned her legitimacy, and called her suspicious. The security guards, several Meridian employees who had gathered to watch the confrontation, and the news crew listened in stunned silence as Patricia's own words condemned her. When the recording ended, Patricia looked like she might faint. That's taken out of context. You don't understand the full situation. Actually, Patricia, I understand the situation perfectly, Victoria said, pulling out another document. Because this isn't the first time you've done this. She handed Jennifer Walsh a summary of Patricia's previous incidents. In March of last year, you called security on Marcus Washington, a black attorney who was here for a consultation with your legal department. You claimed he didn't look like he belonged in the building. In September, you questioned Maria Rodriguez about whether she was, quote, really the owner of her catering company, despite the fact that she was delivering a lunch order that your department had placed. Patricia's eyes went wide. Who told you that? Professional networks are smaller than you think, Patricia, Victoria replied. When someone has a pattern of behavior, word gets around. Jennifer Walsh was practically vibrating with excitement. This was turning into the story of the year. Ms. Whitmore, how do you respond to these allegations of a pattern of discriminatory behavior? Patricia looked around desperately, as if searching for an escape route. This is all lies. These people are making things up to protect a criminal. That's when Robert Meridian emerged from the elevator, flanked by two other executives and looking like a man who had just made the most important decision of his career. Ms. Whitmore, Robert announced, his voice carrying across the lobby. Your employment with Meridian Financial Group is terminated immediately. You are no longer authorized to speak on behalf of this company. Patricia spun around to face him, her face contorting with rage. You can't fire me. I've been protecting this company. I've been doing my job. Your job, Robert said coldly, was to facilitate positive relationships with clients and business partners. Instead, you racially profiled one of our most important potential partners and then lied about the incident on social media and to the press. He turned to Jennifer Walsh. Ms. Walsh, I want to be absolutely clear about Meridian Financial Group's position. Ms. Whitmore's behavior this morning was completely unacceptable and does not reflect our company's values. We take discrimination seriously, and there are consequences for employees who engage in such behavior. Patricia was now completely panicked. This is illegal! You can't fire me for protecting company property. I'll sue. Actually, Patricia, Victoria interrupted, pulling out the final document from her folder. You might want to reconsider any legal action. She handed the paper to Jennifer Walsh. This is a cease and desist letter from my legal team. Patricia's LinkedIn post this morning contained false statements that constitute defamation. Her claims to Channel 9 about corporate espionage and infiltration are also demonstrably false. If she continues to make public statements about me or my company, we'll be filing both criminal and civil charges. Patricia grabbed the document from the reporter's hands, her eyes scanning the legal text. As she read, the color drained from her face completely. Furthermore, Victoria continued, North Carolina has strong laws against workplace discrimination. Patricia's pattern of behavior toward minority visitors to this building creates significant liability for any company that employs her. I imagine that's going to make her quite unemployable in any client-facing role. Jennifer Walsh looked directly into the camera. This is an extraordinary situation. We have documented evidence of what appears to be racial profiling by a corporate employee, followed by false statements to the media. Ms. Chen, what happens next? Victoria straightened her shoulders and looked directly into the camera lens. What happens next is that Meridian Financial Group and Apex Solutions move forward with our $80 million partnership. Mr. Meridian has committed to implementing comprehensive bias training for all employees and establishing a minority supplier development program. Sometimes corporate accountability means acknowledging mistakes and taking concrete steps to ensure they don't happen again. She turned to Patricia, who was standing frozen in the middle of the lobby clutching the cease and desist letter. As for Ms. Whitmore, she now has a choice. She can quietly disappear from social media, find a new career that doesn't involve interacting with the public, and hope that this story doesn't follow her for the rest of her professional life. Or she can continue making false statements about me and my company, in which case my legal team will ensure that her next appearance on camera is in a courtroom. Patricia opened her mouth as if to respond, then seemed to think better of it. Without another word, she turned and walked toward the building's exit, the clicking of her heels echoing hollowly in the marble lobby. Robert stepped forward and extended his hand to Victoria. Ms. Chen, I hope we can put this unfortunate incident behind us and focus on building a successful partnership. Victoria shook his hand firmly. "Mr. Meridian, I believe we can. In fact, I think this experience has given us a unique opportunity to demonstrate what real corporate accountability looks like." Quote. Jennifer Walsh wrapped up her report as Victoria and Robert headed back toward the elevators. This is Jennifer Walsh reporting from Meridian Financial Group, where a routine business meeting turned into a dramatic confrontation over racial profiling and corporate responsibility. The full implications of today's events are still unfolding, but one thing is clear. Sometimes standing up to discrimination means the difference between an $80 million success story and a career-ending disaster. As the elevator doors closed behind Victoria and Robert, Victoria's phone buzzed with a text from her assistant. LinkedIn shows Patricia Whitmore has deleted her profile. Twitter and Facebook accounts also deactivated. Looks like she's taking the quiet disappearance option. Victoria smiled and put her phone away. Sometimes the best revenge was simply letting people face the natural consequences of their own actions. 6 months later, Apex Solutions had successfully completed the first phase of Meridian's digital transformation. The Minority Supplier Development Program had partnered with 12 new businesses, and Patricia Whitmore had quietly moved to a small town in rural Georgia where nobody knew about her 15 minutes of infamy. But the story didn't end there. Within weeks of the Channel 9 broadcast, other companies across Charlotte began reaching out to Victoria, eager to partner with the CEO who had handled corporate discrimination with such grace and strategic brilliance. The incident had transformed from a potential career disaster into the best marketing campaign Apex Solutions never planned. 3 major financial institutions implemented their own bias training programs, specifically citing the, quote, Meridian incident as a wake-up call. Victoria found herself invited to speak at corporate diversity conferences across the Southeast, sharing her experience and helping other companies develop more inclusive practices. The Tesla Model S that had started it all became something of a legend in Charlotte's business community. Victoria eventually had it wrapped in Apex Solutions' corporate colors, turning her daily commute into a rolling advertisement for minority-owned businesses. Local entrepreneurs would joke about getting the Victoria Chen treatment when they faced discrimination, referring to her methodical dismantling of Patricia's career as the gold standard for professional revenge. Perhaps most satisfying of all, the original $80 million contract with Meridian had grown into a long-term partnership worth over $200 million. Victoria's team had not only delivered on every promise, but had exceeded expectations so dramatically that Meridian began referring other clients to Apex Solutions. Robert Meridian later admitted in a Fortune magazine interview that Patricia's racist outburst had been, quote, the most expensive parking lot conversation in corporate history, but also the most valuable lesson his company had ever learned about the cost of unconscious bias. The parking spot where it all began now had a small plaque that read, "Reserved for distinguished guests." But Victoria Chen still preferred to park in regular visitor spaces. After all, she had nothing left to prove. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.